we would talk about religion and spirituality. We have many people in Santa Barbara, I just learned these phrases, who are SBNR or RBNS. Do you know what that is? Okay, religious but not spiritual, or spiritual but not religious. Now we have, the temple in Santa Barbara has been there since 1956. There were lectures there prior to that, from probably 42, when Swami Prabhavananda opened it, 42, 43, I'm never sure of dates. But we have many people who come because it's the American thing to go to church on Sunday, right? So, after coming 30 years, they still are kind of iffy on who Ramakrishna is, though we have a gigantic portrait of him in the front of the temple. But now what's his name again? So I would count them religious, but not necessarily spiritual. Then we have a whole younger group who come and they go, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. And you kind of go, okay. So tonight, I've kind of thought about this, and I have defined religion as a codified, regimented gathering of people who are like-minded, who encourage each other. But it's very much like going to church on Sunday, and they really like the community and they like the feeling of oneness, but they're not really interested in, well, they're interested in doing good works and helping, serving, but they haven't quite gotten to the point where they want to work on their spiritual life. So we're spiritual life is something we do interiorly, and religion is something we do exteriorly. And both are necessary, in my mind. So, but tonight we're going to talk about not religion, because we all know what that is. We're all part of the community, part of the group. Spirituality is becoming, first of all, writing your relationship to the external world. And secondly, writing your relationship to your inner world. So, this is basically Patanjali's yoga aphorisms and the yamas and the niyamas. The yamas write the world, your relationship to the external world. They tell you how to make everything work in the external world. You practice the 5 yamas, and your relationship to the exterior world will be good. So, that's what we'll talk about now. And I know that you all know what they are, or maybe know what the yamas are. I can never remember them. Okay. But first I wanted to read a quote by Swami Vedanta. He said that the highest standard of civilization must rest on ethical law. That law does not teach the survival of the fittest, but makes us realize that the survival of the fittest is the law which governs animal nature. When we shall have learned how to make others fit to survive, we shall have risen above the animal plane and be worthy to be called human. The ideal is to control our brute nature, perpetuate our spiritual insight, and embrace all mankind as children of divinity. Then shall we belong to one brotherhood, to one family. Every action of our lives will be a free offering to humanity, for the good of humanity. Now, personally, I think that's kind of a good thing to remember right now. We have to look at everyone we see as divine beings, whether we like them or not. liking them and getting along with them is, if we practice these 5 yamas, will come more easily. Because they are, of course, ahimsa, which is nonviolence, but it's a little bit more than just nonviolence. It's also, that's obvious. We don't go out and hit people or make war. But we have to have nonviolence in our minds also, in order to see people's divinity. You can't look at them and see someone we're afraid of, someone we think is going to harm us. We have to look at them as divinity, children of God, one with us, which is not so easy sometimes. But in Santa Barbara, we have quite a few homeless people. I don't know how it is here in Pittsburgh, but it's a good climate in Santa Barbara, so it's easy to be homeless on the street. It's not cold at night. When I left, the day I left, it had been 94 that day, and when I left at 3 o'clock in the morning, it had cooled down to 72. And I was like, so it's very easy to be homeless, weather-wise. But what we find is, how many times do we walk by a homeless person who's really, really dirty and looks dangerous and just try and avoid? We all do it. It's a human nature. It's like, ooh, do I have to deal with? But that's not our ideal if we're working on our spiritual life. Acknowledge them as a human being. You don't have to engage with them, but acknowledge them as a human being and one with us. We've been working in Santa Barbara with a homeless shelter for 30 years now. And we go down once a month. All the churches run it together. Every church in Santa Barbara takes a night for this. So our practice is to go down, feed them dinner, make them lunches for the next day, and treat them as if they were guests in our family. Exactly like they were guests. Make the nicest meal we can for them. Do exactly try to do that. And every church tries to do that, and it's been very, very successful. It's a homeless shelter that tries to transition homeless people back into normal life. People who have families, people who have lost their jobs, people who are not necessarily have a drug problem, an alcohol problem, but they're trying to get over it. So it's very successful. So we have ahimsa, which is looking at everyone as God, and I'm getting too far away from the microphone. We don't want to injure anyone. Now, how do we injure people? Okay. We injure people not only physically. We can injure people emotionally. We can injure people through our words, through slights. Swami Swahananda used to say, this always made me laugh. He said, men have arguments and they won't speak to each other. They slam out, this is in the monastery, and they won't talk to each other for days. Women come and they go. And they're very angry at each other. And he'll say, well, what caused it? And he said, she went. And he said, and the next thing you know, they're having tea together and everything's finished. He said, I don't understand it, how women can go, she hurt my feelings, she went. With men it takes much more. So ahimsa is also avoiding that. And the, I don't like the way you looked at me across the table. This is in monasteries and convents, probably in families too. It's also not saying things that will hurt people. We can always, take that little tin that breath before we come back with a retort that will hurt someone. Swami Brahmananda always said, tell the truth, but never a harsh truth. Now, one of the examples Swami Prabhavananda used was we had a devotee in the early days. I never met her, but she wore outrageous hats, and they were really ugly. And she would always ask people, how do you like my hat? And the nuns were trying to practice this, tell the truth but never a harsh truth. And they'd look at the hat and look at the hat and look at it and say, well, it's a very interesting feather. So we can all do this. We can find something positive. We don't have to say, yeah, that's the worst looking hat I've ever seen. Where did you get it? The next of the yamas is satya, the truth. And we've just come through a magnificent display of how people don't tell the truth on the news. We have watched everyone telling us exactly what they think we want to hear. And it has nothing to do with what I would say with reality. But that's what we have been told. Telling the truth is absolutely necessary for a smooth relationship with the world. And you have to be true to yourself first. You have to know what your goal is, what your principles are. Think about them. We just heard a talk by Swami Atmapriyananda, who's a nuclear physicist in charge of Vivekananda University in Bangalore. And he said that's one of the things that is very true about Vedanta. Truth will stand investigation. If it's true for everyone. And they can prove it through their scientific research by studying it, discerning it. Scientific method applies to religion also. Vedanta is an experiential religion. It's not something you say. I say, read the yamas and the niyamas. That doesn't mean you have to do it. It means if that interests you, you look at it, you investigate it for yourself, and find out if it's true for you. But it's not, we do not ask you to mandatorily believe in anything. It is your own personal experience, which is spirituality and religion. So then, misrepresenting is not outright lying. Like we have been told, you can lie by outright, which is not truthful. You can lie by omission, by just simply not saying anything. Even if you know what's true, you just don't say anything. That is not satya. The other thing that the direct disciples said is know when to bend and when to stay firm. We're asking an awful lot of all of you in building your spiritual life, because it all depends on you. It's completely dependent on you. You are in charge of your whole spiritual life. And it's your self-effort that allows everything to come to you. Like everyone has always said, you take 10 steps and the Lord takes 100 steps towards you. And that's true. So, satya is also when you're in school, and this happens even now, you start writing things, and your memory has these things, and you think it's yours, but then you find out, no, it was someone else's. We always have to say whose it was. And so often we do say things that are, well, I've heard that so many times, where did I hear it? But we have to check those things. Another one, the third yama is asteya, non-stealing. Non-stealing. And what does that mean? Stealing means outright taking something from someone else, right? And we have that down pat. We're not going to go out and commit armed robbery. We're not going to go out and take things that we don't pay for. Go through, shoplifting. But beyond that, what else is stealing? Stealing is, mental stealing is even coveting. Having that desire to want it, even if you don't act upon it. You're mentally committing this act of stealing. Because desire is overpowering your discrimination. I remember once I was I will admit this. I was in Hyderabad visiting Swami Ranganathananda, and he sent us over to the Maharaja's museum. And I came back and I said, Swami, for the very first time, I really wanted to take something from that museum. And they never would have noticed it. It was gone. And I said, I really wanted it. And he said, oh, did you take it? And I said, no, but I still think about it. And he said, And I still can see it. It was a statue about this big of Radha and Krishna carved out of beautiful wood, and they were on a swing. And it was stuck way back in a corner behind like 20,000 other things. The Maharaja has a huge accumulation of stuff in Hyderabad. And I thought, he never even knows he has it. But that's, unless we watch our minds, that's what we, desires pop up. And you think you want to do something, We don't take action on them, but they pop up. Ooh, what is advertising about? Trying to create those desires that you never knew you had. I was watching the news one day, and they had one of those informationals on, and I'm going, it was a flashlight, and I was half asleep and half not, and it was, this flashlight can shine for 2 nautical miles, and it has a strobe on it that will discourage thieves and people who are breaking in. And after about 40 seconds of it, I'm going, boy, I need that flashlight. I really need that flashlight. I mean, if we have a fire, this is the flashlight that's going to save us. And then I went, I have 2 flashlights right there on my chest of drawers. Why do I need another flashlight? But it's funny how the mind works if we don't watch it, and how these desires come up. Now, the 4th yama is brahmacharya, which does not, it's defined as chastity, it's defined as remembering the Lord. Complete brahmacharya is thinking of God first. It's not forgetting God. Practicing the presence of God every day of your life. I mean, they had all those books that came out, what would Jesus do? What would Buddha do? And people were trying to think about that. It's not being immoderate. It's not being desiring things for your little self. It's always thinking of the Lord first. And then the last of the yamas is aparigraha, non-possessiveness. Now we can see how these things will help us. Don't be immoderate in speech, eating, purchasing. I don't know how it is, but we had friends in the 80s who were, whenever they would get upset, they would do retail therapy. They would go out shopping because it made them feel better. And it got to be such a joke. It was retail therapy. Now, not so much anymore, but I imagine it still happens. Because it makes you feel good to give yourself a present. Get something kind of, excess. That's a parigraha. So, how do you do these things? I mean, you've put them into your practice, I'm sure. Everyone tries to be truthful. Everyone tries to be moderate in their desires. Everyone tries to be not hurt other people. And we do it so often without knowing we're doing it. The first time I went to India, one of the Swami Vandanananda, who had been in the United States for years, looked at me and he said, "This is your first trip. You will be offended by many things, and you will offend many people." And I looked at him and I thought, yes, that's very true, because we don't know each other's cultures. And the things that were acceptable in my culture in California, I didn't even know I was stepping on people's. I didn't know. And things that I tried not to be offended by much, but just little things. So, and I took that to heart and I thought, yes, we do that every day, because we haven't gotten to know each other. It made me think of Swami Vivekananda when he came to the United States. Now, he was so young. Swami Prabhavananda was too. He was 29 years old when he came. Swami Prabhavananda had a very easy time compared to Swami Vivekananda, because Swami Vivekananda had already met the Mead sisters. He already knew the Legates. He knew all these families. Swami Prabhavananda came over, went to San Francisco, and these women who had taken care of Swami Vivekananda automatically started taking care of him. So he didn't have to get to know everyone and make all of these inroads. But Swami Vivekananda, when you read, he arrived, took the wrong boat, landed on the wrong shore, had to make his way across the United States and Canada in a boxcar at one point, didn't have any money, and there he is sitting on a curb, right? Doesn't know anyone. And a strange woman came out of her house and said, "You must be a representative, come to my house." Now, in India at that time, to have a young monk even talk to a woman would have been astounding, let alone just go into her house with her. But he saw the Divine Mother in everyone, no matter what their culture was. And I think this all had to do with Holy Mother's training also. And Ramakrishna's, they accepted everyone as their family. It didn't matter what color, where they came from. Ramakrishna had the vision of all these white people speaking a language he didn't know. And Swamiji took it to heart. And I think in today's society, we're going to have to look very carefully and try and keep in mind that everyone's nature is divine. And it's going to be a little difficult for a while, I think. It's a test of how much we trust the Divine Mother, how much we trust in our own divinity and the Lord. But that will come out on top. I have total faith in that. Because it always has. When we start looking fearful and we start expecting bad things, we're not practicing our Vedanta. We have to expect everyone to be kind and nice and treat them as if they were going to be. Doesn't mean you have to seek out people, but it means when you encounter people, you look at them as divine beings. And you think about all the early, we expand our horizon rather than contracting it. Because it's only an expansion by practicing these 5 yamas that we can become one. And that was the whole message of Ramakrishna, that we are one. It doesn't matter what we look like. In California, as you know, we have a huge Mexican community. Huge. And we all know that what one political person is saying, let's build a wall. We have a Mexican family who has been with us for 20 years. And I walked out one day and I said, well, Enrique, what are we going to do? He says, this Mexican is going to go pay for the wall and build it. And he said, and I'm voting, I am really going to vote against it. But he can laugh about it because he knows that everyone that he knows personally is not like that. And our friends are not like that. Your friends are not like that. Your acquaintances are not. So I think we can all, continue believing in that, practicing our yamas, keeping that kind of mentality going. Now, I don't know how your lectures go, but ours are, we have questions and answers now, so anyone's welcome to ask any questions they want. You don't have to be shy. And it doesn't matter what you ask about, I'll answer almost anything.
Mother, I have one question about desires.
Yes.
Obviously they pop up.
Yes.
There are 2 ways to deal with it. The way it is, the Indian way I grew up is that you're supposed to dismiss it, the desires, or suppress it. But I'm also a person who is aware of the certain amount of psychology and other things.
Yes.
That the suppression doesn't work.
Doesn't work at all.
Yeah, that it's like a coiled spring.
Yeah.
You can suppress it, but it bounce back.
It's gonna come back 100-fold.
So in the practice of yamas, how do you deal with it?
In the
Do
practice,
you be mindful and just ignore it?
Well, there's-
How do you? Because the more you fight it, you energize it.
yes, of course.
So how do you manage that?
Well, we always said redirect it. Take any desire that you have. If it's for good food, have the good food, but offer it to God first. Just redirect rather than suppressing. Redirection. Another one that Swami Prabhupada always said is watch it. Look at it. Don't say it isn't there, but actually watch your mind. And he said that sooner rather than later, your mind gets tired of being watched and it quiets down. He said, it's like a child who's misbehaving. You don't really go after it, you just watch the child. And pretty soon they get really tired of you watching them and they sort of come into tow. And your mind is exactly like that. You can look at these desires as they come up and use discrimination. Tell yourself, mind, just talk to your mind. Mind, you know this is not leading you in the right direction. This is going to bring more suffering, more pain. Now, why don't you stop this? But not to say you can't think it. Because when you say you can't think it, or say it's wrong to think this, then you're just going, and you are creating a skyrocket in the long run. So, we're human beings. We were born in human bodies, we have desires. And that's what one of the easiest ways is to keep in mind what our goal is. Now, each one of us has our own goal. Mine personally is to see God, because I thoroughly believed it when I was a child in Christianity. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they can see God. Well, I always wanted to do that. So I always keep that in mind. Is this going to help me see God, or is it going to just distract me?
That's very helpful.
Okay. Anyone else, any questions? A very quiet group. Our group is much more, they're much more questioning. Sometimes it has nothing to do with what we've talked about, but they're still going to ask the questions. And as I say, you're welcome to. Are we going to have to get downstairs and do chit-chat to get questions? It's Swami Swahananda said, chit-chat. Okay, I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you how I got involved in Vedanta, because obviously I was not raised with any kind of Eastern thought. I was raised an Episcopalian, went to baptized, confirmed, Sunday school all the way through. And at the end of this, we were talking about it when I was probably 16. And I remember our Sunday school teacher saying to me, well, what are the 3 largest Christian religions? And I popped out without even thinking, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. And she looked at me and she said, Hindus and Buddhists aren't Christians. And I went, they believe in God. Why are we saying they're not Christians? So it was strange at the time, but now I think past karma. So when I met Swami Prabhupada on a vacation, I just looked at him and I thought, this is what I've believed all my life. We did not have, the first time I met him, it was casually in the living room in Santa Barbara. And he was sitting there in his pants and his shirt reading the paper. And I think all we talked about was Vietnam, because it was 1968 and everyone was up in arms about Vietnam. We didn't talk about God at all. But there was something about him that I went, that's what I want. So I moved from Washington State to Santa Barbara within 5 months, I think. Figured I had just finished a teaching job in Hawaii, and I thought, I can get another job down here. And I did. But so, then it took 3 years to move into the convent. But you know what, when you see something like that, you know it immediately. You know, your heart responds. Or as Swami Sarvadevananda said, you respond with your mind, and he always hits his heart. If it doesn't touch your heart, it doesn't go deep. We can think all kinds of things, but to put them into action, we have to feel them. So that was kind of, and I was not interested in religion. Okay? And I made it very clear I was not interested in religion. Swami Vandanananda, many of you might have met him. He ended up vice president of the order in Bellarmine. He was the assistant in Santa Barbara, in Southern California. I never heard a lecture of his because I had other things I wanted to do on the weekend. Swami Prabhupada wasn't speaking. I mean, how I ended up in the convent is still one of those mysteries of the church, as we say. But it happened. And I've been there a long time now. So, and we like to say in our convent, At one point there were 12 of us. And we'd look at each other some mornings and we'd go, you know, if we were in the world, we'd not even be friends. We never would have met each other and we would not be friends. But we're all living together, we're all pursuing the same goal, and we're going to make it work. And that very thing of pursuing the same goal, wanting God more than we wanted success or anything else in the world, or recognition, has kept us all together through the years. Yeah. How many of you been to Santa Barbara that I don't recognize? You have. Well, it's very beautiful, or it was. We're a little dry right now, like really too dry. We're turning into a cactus garden, but it used to be very beautiful and will be again. And you're all welcome to come. Yeah. Our temple is very beautiful. It's not large, but it's very beautiful. And it happens.
So when was this ashram built in Santa Barbara?
I'm sorry?
How long ago was this ashram built?
The temple was built in 1956. The convent was established in probably 1944. And the property was given in 42 or 43. It was given by a gentleman who had met Swami Nikhilananda, and he was from Buffalo, New York. He had a home in Santa Barbara, and he bought the property, and it was so far out of town, his wife hated it. She felt like he had taken her to prison, and she wanted to go back to town. And Swami Prabhavananda was coming up and giving talks in their living room to interested people. It was very small. And Mr. Kellogg kept saying, he offered the property to Swami Prabhavananda, and Swami kept saying, no, I can't take it, Spen. And finally he was sweeping the path, Spencer Kellogg was sweeping the path to the small shrine, which he had built. And he said, well, I'll just give $10,000 to take care of it. And Swami happened to walk up and he said, I'll take it. They couldn't afford to take care of the property. So as soon as he said he put some money behind it, then Swami said, I'll take it. And as I say, that we have a small shrine. And when I say small, it's a little adobe building that is literally 6 by 9 inside. And that was the only shrine on the property for 12 years, 15 years. And all of the pujas, they would open the door to the shrine. The puja would go on inside the shrine, and all of the devotees and monastics would sit outside under the eucalyptus trees. And the music was just outside the shrine. And that's how it went on, and the lectures were in the living room. So, you know, things start a little slowly, and they grow, just like your place is. They all start with a house. And then as momentum grows, then things happen. And the temple then was built in 1956. It was completed and dedicated. Swami Madhavananda and Suji Maharaj, Nirvanananda, came over for the dedication. Madhavananda was he the president then, or he was the general secretary? I'm not sure, but they were both close friends of Swami Prabhavananda, and they came for the dedication. So it was, we have pictures of that. The early Swamis never dressed in Garawa except for religious functions. So here are all these wonderful looking Indian gentlemen in pants, suits, and big overcoats. Somehow they all thought this was going to be very cold. And this was 1950, 56. So they all look like gangsters standing there in their overcoats. And we look at them and go, yeah, well, anyway. It's just like movies of the 30s. And they're all, it's very cute. Very sweet. So, yeah, that's how. The Hollywood Temple started earlier, in the 30s, because I'm not sure when it was built, but the greenhouse where the bookstore is now was Sister Lalita's, who was one of the Mead sisters where Swamiji lived in Pasadena. It was her summer home. And she brought Swami Prabhavananda down from Portland to start the center in Hollywood. So that's how that began.
Yeah, Hollywood Temple is too big. I went there. Hollywood.
Yeah.
Ashrama.
Yeah. Well, the bookstore
Yeah.
is the old greenhouse. Yeah. Where everything started. And one of those closets off the room that they have where you can watch the TV was the shrine. The only shrine they had until the temple was built. Everything starts very small. Yeah. But it grows.
Mataji, I have questions. Like, when I try to be more, so when I practice meditation, doing puja and everything, then I'm not that productive in my workplace. But when I do little and concentrate more on my work, I become more productive. So how can I balance between doing puja, meditation, and again the productive in the workplace as well? I mean, I know a lot of people are saying that if I do meditation, I should be more efficient and more productive. But in my own personal life, I didn't find that.
Well, in my experience, if you can put full concentration on puja and meditation for a short time, you don't have to do it for a long time, but full concentration, then you take that full concentration to your work productivity, and as soon as you learn how to concentrate in any area, anywhere, you can take it everywhere. And like they've always told us, all of the direct disciples, and I can't remember who, I'm not good at history, I'm not good at remembering who said what. I remember what they said, but I don't remember who it was. But they said if you can put you only need 1/10 of your mind for the outside world, and you can be fully productive. Now, all of you probably have one thing that you adore doing, and you have probably done it to the time when you lose track of time completely, the world ceases to exist, and you are just doing that one thing. It's almost always a solitary activity. For a brief period, I took up painting, and I absolutely loved it. And I would sit there, and I only painted for like 2 hours a day. I mean, I did all my other convent things. But once in a while, I would get so involved in it that everything disappeared. Everything. And it was, when I, get back into the world, I think, wow, now if I could do that every time I meditated, I would be making supreme progress. But we have to, if you can do it, if you can experience it in your work, you can take it to meditation, because it's just taking control of your mind and concentrating it. What happens to us normally is we sit down and try and quiet our mind, and it goes like, I mean, I have planned more remodels and more, schedules for the convent when I sit down to meditate than I ever want to tell you about. Because everything comes to your mind when you sit down and try and be quiet, right? And you go, now if I did this and this and this, and I've got to call a plumber, and I've got to get this done, and then you go, why am I sitting here? But that's what that's the nature of the mind. It just wants to be distracted. And I think in work, you have that absolute substantial thing to concentrate on. The Lord is a little more insubstantial, and so it's a little harder unless you have an ishta in a mantra. And then you have a little more substantial reality reality within Maya to concentrate on. I mean, Swami Shraddhananda told us that when he was a very young monk, he told Swami Shivananda, who was his guru, that he wanted to meditate on Om. And Swami Shivananda told him, okay, meditate on Om. And he walked by, after about 2 weeks, he walked by Swami Shraddhananda and he said, how are you and Om getting along? And Swami Shraddhananda said, I'll meditate on Thakur again. Om was a little vague, harder to concentrate on. So we have to know our own minds and use where we are. But it's a good question, because we all have the same problem, I think. If you're in, it's a very good question. Very good questions. So.
Mataji, I have one question.
Okay.
So when you were talking about Satya,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that even misrepresenting something or even omitting something is not Satya.
Not truthful. Yeah.
But then when you say
Tell the truth, but never a harmful truth.
yes, how do you reconcile with?
That's a tough one.
It's a very good point. Excellent. Sometimes we will avoid, which is what you would call omission. But if someone asks you directly, then like the woman who would ask about her hat, how do you like my hat? Find something positive that's truthful. You don't have to tell the whole truth because you don't want to hurt people. But to find something positive to answer. And you're not being dishonest. And you're not hurting them. But it requires, everything in Vedanta that I found requires a monumental amount of self-examination. You have to really look at your mind and see what it's doing. Because until you recognize what it's doing, you don't have a hope of changing it unless you go into bhakti yoga, and then we'll talk about that later. There are different ways, but how to know God is basically Raja Yoga and Jnana Yoga, and we all have to put that into practice. And I think most of us tend to be, most have a certain degree of education. We have concentrated on honing our minds and thinking about things. Now it's time to direct it in a way, in a spiritual direction that will help your spiritual growth rather than your growth in Maya. But the nice thing about it is usually they go hand in hand. almost always they go hand in hand. The more you concentrate your mind, Maya runs after you and gives you more and more success to try and keep you there. So it's interesting. Yeah. I know sometimes in the workplace it gets a little harder, much harder. I had a friend who actually found the markers for Alzheimer's. She was doing research in Los Angeles. And she came up and she said, the other people in the lab have taken all the credit. And she said, what do I do? And Swami Swahananda said, well, basically you're going to have to accept it if they've already gotten the credit for it. But you don't have to stay there. You know, you can extricate yourself. And it was just competition. Competition gives rise to our less attractive nature. Because competition, and we have to compete. I mean, competition is in the business world, but we have to know how hard. Katha Upanishad, good and the pleasant, choosing between the good and the pleasant all the time. What is the best for my growth spiritually? It's not an easy place to be and it's not fun, but it works. And it is very, very, it's difficult at first. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes. Yes?
So I don't know much about Christianity, but as you were exposed, so you were exposed to Christianity. I mean, you grew up, you were exposed to Christianity.
Oh, I grew up a staunch Episcopalian.
So, what attracted you to, I mean, Vedanta? I mean, there must be something in there that...
Swami Prabhupada.
But what the...
That was it. I absolutely looked at him and I went, that's who I want to be with for the rest of my life. But also because in Christianity, the parts that I read and listened to, I had a red letter edition of the Bible. Now, you say you're not too familiar. Red letter editions of the Bible, the King James Bible, everything that Jesus said is in red. So you can ignore the rest of the Bible where other people are talking or they're interpreting, and you can just read what Jesus said. And that's how I read the Bible. The Sermon on the Mount was one of the most important things that I read. And Swami Prabhupada was a Christian scholar. He wrote the book Sermon on the Mount according to Vedanta. I think it was Swami Premananda or someone told him to study the Bible when he was in school. The thing that I remember most, the 10 Commandments, they were Moses, not Jesus. But Jesus said the 2 great commandments are love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, and with all thy being, and thy neighbor as thyself. And those were the 2 that I took. And that's Vedanta. That is Vedanta. It's what Swamiji said. Serve God in man. Service to God in man. So, to me, there was absolutely no conflict. I mean, isn't that what you grew up believing? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, and with all thy being, and thy neighbor as thyself. Yeah. No conflict at all. Yes.
Mataji, I was wondering if you could settle a query that I'm having, and I was having a discussion with a friend. The Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts.
As
But
we
that
for-
was then eventually trespasses were substituted for debt. When did that actually happen?
I don't know.
Okay.
As I say,
Because the old version is
History-
forgive us our debts, and then all of a sudden we find that forgive us our trespasses.
yeah,
It was kind of I was just wondering if it had
Well-
something to do with the 1930s or not.
no, I
That's
don't.
roughly.
It was the King James version, I think.
King
Also,
James version was the debt, forgive our debt.
yeah, I'm
And
trying to
the
think
name.
what I knew in the Book of Common Prayer. If pressed, I could probably do the Nicene Creed still, but I'd leave out a few bits.
King James version had the debt in it, right? Forgive
Well,
us our
wouldn't transgressions and debts be similar? Wouldn't it just be a linguistic thing?
The trespasses, someone commits trespass against you, but you forgive someone else's debt. The responsibility is on you.
Well, forgive us our debts as we forgive our
Those
debtors.
who have, yeah, our debt, yeah.
So that's basically saying, forgive us our debts to humanity as we forgive our debtors, the ones who have betrayed us. Trespassing is the same thing, or trespass. Yeah. To me, I don't have much problem with that. Debt doesn't mean cash.
But debt would mean credit.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It would be your word, giving your word in the old days, and then not keeping it. It wouldn't necessarily be a
Transaction.
a business transaction. It could be anything. You know, like I will be at a certain place at a certain time, and then they don't show up. And you say the same thing and you don't show up. You're not keeping your word. So transgressions and debts could be that. Would be my interpretation.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's right. Anything else before we go downstairs?
There's some more time.
Hmm?
There's some more time to go.
More time? Okay. You're going to have to ask more questions.
Mataji, anything you can share about how Prabhupada taught you about Vedanta, or to put things into practice? Like you were saying that
Yes.
When you saw him the first time, you were stuck
Yes.
seeing him, but how did it translate into the action or the practices that you've been doing last 30, 40 years?
He attracted people with love. Every single person that I think was to be his disciple knew he loved them right the minute you met him. I don't know how it happened. I have no idea how it happened. Because when I first started going to Vedanta, I thought he was the greatest thing that I had ever discovered, and everyone would recognize that. And I dragged all of my friends up to hear him, and they saw nothing but an old man. So I had no idea. Past karma, I don't know. I just knew the instant I saw him I wanted to be there. And the way he taught us was simply by being with us. Oh, he gave classes, and he gave lectures. And I, as a totally biased person, think they're still the greatest ones I've ever heard. It doesn't matter. You know, that's my own bias. It has served me well because he is my guru. So, and I hope everyone has the same feeling about their guru. And I think all of us are right. But it's also that they're all channels to Ramakrishna. And that's what is really attracting us. He comes in different forms. He comes in different personalities. Swami Prabhupada was a Bengali. And we had Jatras. We had quite a few. He would be very dramatic. He would be very bombastic at times. He scolded us. He was also, the whole time he was scolding, you knew somehow it didn't hurt. You know, he'd be yelling at you, and you'd be going, yes, Swami, and it just didn't hurt. So it's just, you know, I don't know. I have no idea how it worked. But I know the reason I moved into the convent. I went to him and I said, well, Swami, I finally read the gospel. Now this took 4 years because I was really mad at Ramakrishna. I thought, women in gold? I was in the women's lib movement, okay? Women in gold, forget that. I don't want to be around anyone who says women in gold are the cause of all problems. So I wouldn't read the gospel. And finally I read it. And I said, so it says if you want to really progress in spiritual life, you should live near your guru and see if he's real. And I said, so I think I better move into the convent while you're alive. And you're really old right now, so I think I better move in. But I'm not promising to stay. And he looked at me and he went, okay. Yes, I think that's a good idea. You know, taking this nonsense perfectly seriously. I mean, that he didn't sit back and laugh at me is a wonder, but he took this nonsense that was coming out of my mouth. I think you should. So, and I mean, it was, and I'm leaving as soon as you die. I told him straight out. Yeah. And he went, Well, he left his body in 76 on the 4th of July, just like Swamiji. So, yeah. And he waited for the 4th of July. He did. We were all down there with him. And he kept asking the nurse, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? And finally, when it was after 12, he left his body. So he had that grace of Maharaj to be able to choose when he left it, or to hold on that long. So, yeah, he taught us by chit-chat at the table, not necessarily about God, though he and Swami Pravitrananda, when Pravitrananda would visit, they would discuss self-effort and grace. And Swami Pravitrananda always took self-effort, and Swami Prabhupada always took grace. And they just talked, and we would listen. And I remember getting, when are they going to get on another subject? But, you know, we're young and we don't know that we're getting more intimate teachings than most people get in their entire lives. We didn't know. And we treat them just like anyone else. I mean, we had arguments. Yes, I argued with my guru. I questioned him sometimes. Yes, we argued. He won. He always won. He would scold. He would... It was the way it was. You know? I mean, and we laughed a lot. He always kept us laughing. He said, Maharaj, there was only one Maharaj and one Swamiji when they were alive. Maharaj was Brahmananda and Swamiji was Vivekananda. And no one else was Swamiji or Maharaj. So when I talk, that's what I mean. He said, Maharaj always said you should laugh every day because it's good for digestion, especially at meals. And he was a great prankster. He played practical jokes on his brother monks all the time. You probably read the one of Swami Akhandananda who was leaving Bellarmine, and Maharaj did not want him to leave. And so he put him on a danda in the dark, at night, and he was supposed to go, taking him somewhere. And in the morning, he greeted him. And Swami Akhandananda says, "Oh, you brother, you didn't let me out of the compound at all." But they played jokes on each other all the time. I mean, if spirituality and religion should not make you grim or unhappy. I mean, as he used to say, if you're seeking bliss, how can you be unhappy? How can you be... The worst thing for a convent is to go around like... What? So, we try to remember that. And Swami Nikhilananda told jokes all the time. And they always tried to best each other on their jokes. Swami Swanananda got into that routine, but he could remember them. I can't remember them. And Swami Prabhupada always gave the punchline before he told the joke. It was a disaster. And he'd start in the pulpit, he'd say, "I'm going to tell a joke now." And he'd say, "And my daughters are all going to cringe." And he'd give the punchline, and then he'd tell the joke, and everyone would kind of go, "Okay." But it never deterred him. He was undaunted in his joke telling. Yes, we were very, very fortunate. And I think in the West we had that good fortune because we needed more help. We needed more punch to get, or a jump start to get into Vedanta. Because we had all of these swamis who were disciples of Maharaj, or as in the case of Swami Shraddhananda, Shivananda, they used to come visit every summer. And when they were in Santa Barbara, they stayed in the convent. Because we didn't have a monastery at that time. So our buildings are spread out. And they had 2 rooms next to the living room and kitchen. And they would stay there, and they would, come in the morning for breakfast, come and help you in the kitchen, or as Swami Pravitrananda, he would come in and see if he could help. And then if you said, "No, it's okay, Swami," then he'd go play the piano for you so that it was nice while you were fixing breakfast. But it was very, very casual. It was family time. And because it was family time and casual, we didn't realize exactly what we had until they were gone. And then you looked at it and you went, "I was really lucky." And I had all of it. And we knew Swami Asheshananda. We'd go up and see him in Portland, Holy Mother's disciple, who looked like a homeless person when he went out. He had these old overcoats and old hats that were given to him by beloved swamis, beloved senior swamis. And he wore them till he died. And they had died a long time before he did. He had this old cap. It was just awful. It was like this and had ear flaps. And he wore it all the time. It was awful. And we wanted to take it away from him and wash it. That's all we wanted to do. And he refused. He absolutely said, "You cannot, no. I can't remember who it was gave it to him, but it was some revered Swami had given it to him. No. He had 2 buildings where women could come and stay. I don't know if any of you ever got up to Portland. Holy Mother's house and Sarda house. And Holy Mother's house was a little ways away from the center, 5 blocks or something. And he mowed all the lawns himself. till he was probably 85. He didn't let anyone do anything for him. No. And it would, so he would mow this lawn, and here he's in an old dirty overcoat, really awful, and this hat, and he's out there mowing the lawn, and the people next door finally came over to Mrs. Vera Edwards and said, "Can you please tell your gardener to stop mowing our lawn?" He didn't do a very good job. It was kind of hot shot. And she just looked at him and said, "I'll try." "Can you please tell your gardener to stop mowing our lawn?" He was like that. And scolding, oh my goodness gracious. I took my parents were in Washington State, and I went to visit them, and I said, you know, I've got to run down and I've got to go to Portland and see Swami Asheshananda since I'm up here. And my mother and father, who were still staunch Episcopalians, their only daughter had moved into this Hindu cult, which they weren't pleased with for quite a while. And they said, well, we'll go with you. And I went, okay. Now, I know Swami Asheshananda, so I am prepared for this. He came out, and he had what you call a foyer. And you'd walk in the front door, and there was this area, little gathering area with some seats. And he came out, and he said to my parents, I'm so glad to meet you. You know, you are so blessed to have a daughter who's in the convent. May I get you something to drink and something to eat? And they both were overwhelmed by how kind he was and how sweet he was. He went out that door, closed it, and all he was doing was screaming, "You Americans, you caused everything. You caused Hiroshima. You are the cause of all the problems," and screaming. Came back through the door with these plates of prasad. He said, "Please take this one, and you take this one, and you take this one." And he's just sweet as pie, and everything's just fine. Walked through the door again and continued to scream. By this time, he came back in and he was saying, "Now may I show you the rest of the property? And would you like to see our shrine?" And my dad is laughing so hard he can't stand up. And I said, "Oh, Swami, that's so kind of you. No, this we've got through." And he went back through the door and continued screaming at this poor monk, who was the cause of Hiroshima and everything else, right? World War II, whatever, he was the cause of it. Well, we left. My dad said, "I've never met anyone like him in my life, and I love him." So that's what something else came through. They're very beings. But I mean, that's how, there was a lot of that. Swami Swahananda was no better. Was no better. He came up one time to Santa Barbara and was pondering things. And we said, "Swami, what's the matter?" He says, "I'm trying to think of the perfect criticism of someone where I won't hurt them too badly, but I really want to get my point across." He was one of the monks. He said, I'm supposed to be a saint, and he makes me so mad. And so he spent like 2 days trying to think of the perfect thing to say that would hurt him just enough. And we never knew what it was, but he told us, "Yes, I'm trying to think what to say." So it continues. Yeah. You all know Swami Swahananda. How many of you are his disciples? Okay. One of the last, I was not there, but it was a public dinner day, or some visiting Swami was there in Hollywood. And one of our nuns was down there with a young boy who was staying with us at the time. This was probably 3 months before he died, maybe a little closer. So he sat in the front row with his neck brace on. You know, he wore the neck brace for quite sound asleep while this younger Swami was giving a talk. The younger Swami finished his talk. Swami Sarvadevananda stood up and said, "Well, you didn't take enough time. I'm going to have to talk some now." Swami Swahananda still looks seemingly sound asleep. And then he woke up and he said, "Well, I've had to sit here and endure this, so it's my turn to talk." So he got up and he said, "Well, I don't do much these days but watch television. I like the Mahabharata and Perry Mason." And he said, "And I've had to listen to this. I don't know what you said because I was sound asleep." And then proceeded to talk. And our nun who was there and the young boy, they were just like, when they say, you know, be honest. Yes. One of my jobs during the last year and a half of his life was checking movies to see if they were okay and finding the right ones to watch, because he watched the Mahabharata all the time. I saw the sequel where Karna takes off his armor until I'm just like, ugh. Swami, I don't want to see it again. No, it's the best part of the Mahabharata. You have to see. No, you have to watch. And the Ramayana. But he also watched Perry Mason all the time. Loved Perry Mason. And then he liked movies that had a good moral message and were heroic. So we saw ones on Nelson Mandela, all kinds of things. Yes, that's a good one. I like that. One of his favorites was that John Adams series that was on KCET. Oh, he watched that about 5 times. Yeah, he loved that. The founding of the, founding father, writing of the Constitution. Yeah, loved that movie. Really, it was a long series, and someone gave him the whole thing so he could watch it as much as he wanted. My own interpretation of this is because he had things playing all the time. He didn't really have the energy to talk to people, but they wanted to be with him. So he let everyone come into his room and sit with him while the TV went. And he slept part-time and he made a few comments. But everyone came and wanted to be with him. And it took too much energy to talk all the time. So he compromised and he saw uplifting things on television, in the movies, and everyone could have darshan. I don't know how they looked at it, but that's how I always, and then we were always eating way too much because he was diabetic, you know. And some of you may have known Niranjan, who took care of him for a while.
He lives here. He is from Pittsburgh.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he lives 100 miles from here.
Oh, I should give him a call while I'm here. Yeah. Anyway, Niranjan came and he said, I put on 15 pounds taking him around because I felt compelled to eat the stuff before he did because he's diabetic. And we all found ourselves, you know, taking more chocolate than we wanted, taking more potatoes than we wanted because he was going to eat them if they were there. When, you know, it was just, anyway, you all knew him.
With Swami Swahananda, many people. With Swami Swahananda, many among us have noticed that when he stayed in any house, even if you are not talking to him, the whole environment would be lifted.
Yes.
That we all say. So it didn't matter whether he's watching and sleeping through the Mahabharata.
Not even at all.
Exactly. It was like this blanket, not blankets, this surreal environment in which we almost stayed like a dazed people. At least that happened with many among us here.
Yes.
This way. And others have noticed too. When he traveled in Seattle, people said that we know something is different in the ashrama. Not necessarily they're talking to him, but the fact that he's there, he had this enormous, I don't know what you guys call it, I'm pretty sure there's a spiritual name for that. The spiritual
connection. They're like plugged in to the main. Yeah.
But
I
he
think.
liked to talk. Swami Shivananda, he liked to talk. He liked to everybody see around with him.
Yes, he did. One time, he got mad at us. Got very mad at the Santa Barbara convent. Well, I can't remember, but I have a feeling I know what it was. He used to call us and say, so-and-so's coming, feed them lunch. And I think one day he called and we were going to a devotee's house. And we said, Swami, we're going out to lunch today. All right. So for 5 years, he told everyone who came to Hollywood, go up to Santa Barbara, and if they like you, they'll feed you. If they like you, they'll feed you. I mean, what a way to send someone up. What a way. Another time he called, and he said, I have 3 very important women from Dallas or Houston, from Texas somewhere, and they're very, very important. You have to take care of them. We said, sure, of course, Swami, of course. One is the president, one is the singer, and he looked at, you could tell he was like, and what do you do? So when they arrived in Santa Barbara, we said, who's the president, who's the singer, and what do you do? They were sitting right there in front of him. That's telling the truth. And he didn't hurt them. It was just, what do you do? I know you're important. Yeah. It was fun. And I have a feeling that all of the Swamis, as they get nearer to the end of their life, that feeling is more apparent. Much more apparent to everyone. Because they don't hold it in so well. Because they're getting closer to the end of their life.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned about self-effort and grace.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which one won?
Which one? Yeah. What do I need? Self-effort or grace? But how do I know I have grace?
You need both.
Yeah. How do I know the grace?
You do. Do you have a guru?
Yeah.
You have the grace of the guru. You have the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one other thing necessary.
Self-effort.
The grace of your own mind. To know that you have that grace. Now, those are the 3 things you need for God realization. The grace of God, the grace of the guru, and the grace of your own mind. Swami Pavitra, the basic thing is, when Ramakrishna said, the breeze of grace is always blowing, but you have to set the sail. That's the self-effort. And then Swami Swahananda told a joke that he loved. This man was crying and crying to God. Let me win the lottery. Let me win the lottery. Oh, I need to win the lottery. God, please let me win the lottery. And finally God says, you have to buy a ticket. That's the self-effort. We have to do our part.
So, just before you said, towards the end of their Swamis attain Mahasamadhi, the feeling is different. What is that?
It's not. I think that basically the years of meditation and concentration, they all have made supreme progress in their spiritual life, but they contain the feeling. And as they get closer to the end of their life, they let us see it more.
The body does not take that anymore.
No, I think they just give us the grace of the Guru, and we can experience it when we're with them. I think they probably have it for quite a while, but it's not the important part. It's the frosting on the cake. The important part is for us to change our own, to control our own minds, to make our own spiritual progress. And they let us see hints of it, of where we will be when we do it.
Thanks, Mother.
Yeah. Swami Prabhupada and Swami Pavitrananda. Swami Prabhupada was a mystic, and he had visions and he had experiences. But he always said that it's not important. He said some people have a mystic temperament, other people don't. And it doesn't matter whether you have visions or spiritual experiences. The proof of Vedanta is transformation. Transforming yourself, becoming your recognizing your own Atman and letting that shine forth. You don't need experiences, you don't need mystic vision. He said you can tell it by the character of a person. And that's where the most important thing is. Is it a transformation of character? Now, if you tend to be a bhakta who wants to see God, that's what you want. And you hope you're of the mystic temperament, or you're going to have to wait till the day you die. But, yeah, transformation of character is what we're all trying for. Transforming ourselves into that divine being that we already are. Yeah.
But vision and experiences are a result of your transformation also, isn't it?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. There are realized monks of the order who never had a vision or an experience until they have Mahasamadhi, but they have transformed their character completely. They're just not of the mystic temperament. They experience God at all times, but they don't have visions. Yeah, both are there. People are different. They come in with different temperaments.
The grace of mind is still a self-effort, Mataji?
Grace of mind, yes. If you have doubts, that's only normal too. That's part of why I moved in. You have doubts. Okay, they say I should know my guru. Well, I don't know him if I only come once in a while. I mean, I didn't. So I had to know him. And that was that little doubt that got me into the convent, which is a good doubt, because it led me further along my particular path. But faith without doubt becomes fanaticism. You have to test things and see if it's real for you, not just blindly. Well, I mean, we all have to take the initial blind faith. God is. We have to make that one without having had the experience. But once we have a firm faith in that, then you can doubt almost anything else and prove it for yourself. And that's where the self-effort comes in. Just like scientific experiments. You start with a premise, you start with an idea, and you try to prove it. But you start with the conclusion that you would like to have. God is. And so you go about trying all these different methods or paths to prove that to yourself and experience it. You have to experience that oneness, and then there's no more doubt at all. Like Einstein said, some of the best revelations were when he was seemingly doing nothing. When he was not trying to prove anything, trying to think of anything, he would just be sitting and looking at nature or something. And he said, suddenly these revelations would come to him. A lot of self-effort went in to have that revelation. A lot of study, a lot of mathematics, a lot of self-effort. But then the revelation itself was the grace that came. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of, okay.
So the tests you mentioned, Mataji, what tests should I test on a different paths? Should I?
Well, I mean, some of us are drawn to jnana, you know, neti, not this, not this, not this. What is eternal? What is unchanging? I find that a very useful but depressing at times. I tend more to the Tantra, where it's this. Everything I see is God, and I try and see that. So you look at your own mind and see what helps you on the path to God realization. Like I said, I found jnana useful, very, very useful, because lots of things you think are pretty good, but then when you do test them, you know, is it going to last? But I tend to like the affirmation better. And that's more difficult sometimes when you see the results of this election for me. Yes, it's God. It is God. It is truly God, and it's Mother's will, and I will continue to believe that. If you have a highly emotional temperament, highly emotional, where you have passionate reactions to everything, that one, Bhakti Yoga is probably more suitable, because you're going to have the passionate reactions. You're going to have, you might have a temper that flares, and the next time you're loving someone. Easier to reach your goal if you direct those to God. If you're angry, be angry with God. It's easier to do anything for love. So, and if you kind of like to work, really like to work. I remember this is another thing I told Swami Pravrajika. I read Swamiji's 4 yogas. And I went, okay, Swami, I will take up karma yoga because that's the easiest one. He had to put up with a lot of nonsense coming out of my mouth. And he said, yes, I think you should. And I realized it's not easy at all. But if you do have a temperament that likes to work, then you work on your mind literally giving up the attachment to the results. And every time you find yourself wanting that little pat on the back, because I did a good job. But please don't criticize me when I really blow it, okay? It wasn't my fault. It was someone else's. But you find where your temperament is. Now, in the convent and the order, we're encouraged to follow all four paths to balance them out. So like our day at the convent would be when we first move in, and to set the habits. 3 hours of meditation a day, morning, noon, and evening. Breakfast and lunch as a community, because we offer hot bog in the small shrine every day. 3 hours of karma yoga, not jobs we choose, but we rotated on them. So everyone knew every job, and whether we were good at them or not, we did them. And we had, our eldest nun used to say, we don't do what we like what we do. And she said it so often, I was just, when we were doing one of the most odious jobs in the convent, I would want to hit her. When she'd walk by and say, we don't do what we like what we do. And I go, I don't like this job. Really don't. None of us liked that job. It was cleaning a grease trap outside the kitchen. And if any of you have had the experience, it's the stinkiest, dirtiest job that God created. It really is. And we were like, but if you do tend to stay active all the time and that's your nature, then yes, use karma yoga. You work on your mind with it. And then we have Raja Yoga, sitting and meditating. Not too many people can really do that in today's society, because we do tend to that takes a lot of training of the mind. Physically, most people can't sit that long because they start to notice their body right away. Things hurt, there's a bug, there's a mosquito around, or in our place it's deer fly, and you're going, we're not concentrating. And meditation hardly ever happens. We sit and we try. And once in a while we can concentrate. Really get that concentration going. But for the most part we're sitting and watching our minds, trying to concentrate, trying to say our mantras and visualize, trying to do all of that. But after you get the taste for it, then it becomes easier. But it takes a great deal of practice. Like all the yogas, they all take a great deal of practice. It's not something you casually walk into and, like I didn't say, oh, I'll do karma yoga. Or, Swami Prabhupada was not a pujari, but he set the most ritualistic centers in the Western Hemisphere alive in California. We do Kali Puja, we do Durga Puja, we do Puja every day in two shrines in Santa Barbara. We offer hot food in the small shrine, hot food in Hollywood, hot food to Thakur every day in Trabuco. They don't even do that in India at all the centers. They do it at Bellarmine. So here we are doing all of this. And Swami had been told by, I think, Swami Premananda, or one of the direct disciples, you've got to learn puja. So he learned it, but he was not a pujari like Swami Swahananda. And so he came over and taught puja to his, monastics and disciples. And it was all in English, so we'd know what we were doing. The mantras, a few of the mantras, major ones, are in Sanskrit. but everything was in English. And I remember going to him and saying, Swami, what does this mean? And he looked at me and says, just do it and you'll find out. And I went, okay. And he's right. If we'd not going in with a preconceived notion helped me to concentrate better because I wanted to know what it was. And yes, you all of a sudden you do know what it is. And okay, got that one. But so often we get our mind involved in analyzing things that when Bhakti Yoga truly takes devotion, emotion, and love. And we don't have to get our minds so involved. You know, contemplate. Our minds are involved in thinking of things we can do for the Lord. Thinking of things we can do for our beloved. But it doesn't require is this good for me or is this bad for me? It requires I'm doing it out of love. So that's when I say, first you have to know yourself, or let your guru direct you. Swami Sarvadevananda has a wonderful thing. When he initiated someone came up to him and said, now, this, and he said, do not edit your guru. Just do what he says. Stop editing. And so often we think, maybe it's not enough, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. Really, all you have to do is what they tell you. That's it. Because they do know. One of my other ones, I went to Swami P and I said, what more can I do? Wild enthusiasm, right? And he says, memorize the Gita. And I went, really? The whole thing? In English? I still haven't done it, but I will before I die. Easy. Okay. But we don't have to edit. We just do what they say without adding, embellishing, taking away. We don't have to do that anymore. Yeah, it works. It does work. Okay. Shall we go down and have snacks? Or dinner or whatever?